Hi everyone, I am Winona Laird, a professional genealogist. Are you wanting to get started on your family history? And are you wondering how to get started? Where do you do your research? What information do you need? And who do you start with first? Well, I'm about to give you the answers to all of those questions in the Fundamentals of Genealogy. What is genealogy? What sources do we use? We'll talk about the different repositories and some of the forms we'll use. Also, citing your sources and setting your goals. So, genealogy is a study or investigation of your ancestors and family histories. Why do people spend so many four-letter words like time, work, and cash chasing dead ancestors? What motivates us to get started? Well, we don't know because everyone has a different reason. Doing your family history research can be rewarding lifelong pastime, taking you to new places, introducing you to new cousins, and giving you a deeper appreciation of your unique heritage. Find out about your past, share it with your current family members, and record it for all future generations. There have been surveys done that ranks genealogy as one of the most popular hobbies in America. The first rule that we have in genealogy is to keep an open mind. While doing research, you can run into information that just might shock you, but remember, nobody is perfect, not even our ancestors. The second rule is always seek more than one source for proof. Have you ever climbed a tree and sat up there and enjoyed the view of all that you can see? Well, get ready to climb your family tree. It will be the most fascinating view that you have ever seen. Getting started, you want to start with yourself. Write all your own information, birth, baptism, marriage, education, careers, residence where you've lived, and all the information about you. Continue with collecting details for individuals in your family. When collecting the family information, you use what we call sources. So some of these sources are the vital records, old letters, family member records, land deeds and records, family Bibles, printed family histories, cemetery and funeral home, newspaper articles, census records, school records and courthouse records, wills and probate records, immigration, naturalization, and passport applications, city directory, church records, maps, and county histories. Also, look at memorial cards that you might have laying around the house. And what about the diaries that you might have? Photos are also a very important thing to gather. So the definition of sources is a record, however obscure or informal, from which we get our information. A record used in locating information. Sound genealogy research is built on a variety of sources. Start with vital records because these are the records of birth, marriage, and death certificates. They are the heart and soul of the genealogical research. They are also known as civil registrations in other countries. Birth, marriage, and deaths are usually reported at the city or county level. Today, they are at the state level. Vital records are not kept at the national level. It is the state's responsibility. When you're sending for any of these certificates, they'll ask you why you need the certificate and you want to put down for genealogical use only. What about any old letters that you might have laying around the house? You want to read them again because you might find a lot of information in the letter that you didn't realize you needed prior, because maybe there are births and deaths, there's names of relatives, also important events in their lives. While you're reading these letters, look for other clues that might be there in the letters. Also, family members. Write or call your family member. Ask them if they have any information about your relatives. Maybe one of your relatives are already doing genealogy for the family and you can work together with them. Or maybe they can provide you with names, dates, etc. Also ask them if they have any pictures that they might have of relatives and if they could send you a copy. If you have any older relatives, parents, aunts, uncles, ask if you can interview them. You want to prepare a list of questions before you do the interviewing. When you do the interview, ask open-ended questions by using the 5 W's: who, what, when, where, and why. Ask questions that are easy to understand and to respond to. Save sensitive questions until you have established a rapport, especially if it's a relative or friend that you have just met. Take your time and do not interrupt. Don't wear out who you're interviewing and always leave the door open for a future discussion. After the interview, write them a thank you note. Give them a copy of your pedigree chart or family group sheet or whatever information that they would like. You might think about some of the questions that you can ask them, like, what was school like when you were younger? Do you have any stories about your parents or grandparents? Were either of your grandparents in the military? What are your earliest memories of your childhood? Do you remember visiting other relatives? How did they celebrate holidays and Sundays? Were there any special things in your home that you might remember? Do you remember any fads that there were when you were young? Do you remember any particular world events when you were growing up? Can you describe a typical family dinner? Then we have land records. They are among the most underutilized resource used by genealogy research. Land records were the first records that were created in the new areas that opened up for settlement. As land changed hands through purchase and sale or inheritance, establishing records of ownership was very important. We had the Homestead Act, bounty lands, military and land grants, land patents, survey plats and field notes, land status records, and land deeds. These records can be found at the Bureau of Land Management. That website is www.blm.gov. You can also find land records online. Do you have a family Bible, or maybe somebody else in your family has the Bible? Because they used to record in their Bibles the information of births, marriages, deaths, and other information. Do you have a family history? If not, you might want to go to Google Books and check out to see if there's a family history about you. Just go in and put your family name in and search. Now, another place to look is at WorldCat. It's free. You go in and create yourself an account. Then you start looking for books. You can look for a family name in books and see if there's any information. If you happen to find any information or find a book that is in there, you can go and save that book to your account so you can go back later and read the information again. Also, Go to google.com and just put in your ancestor's name, see what kind of information you can find out about them. The book that I have here on the slide happens to be the book that I have written. It's about my grandmother's life story. It's called Have You Ever Lived in a Mining Town? It is on sale here on the website. Funeral homes. The information you could find at a funeral home will be probably a copy of the obituary, the deceased's full name, cause of death, the pallbearers' names. There would be other family names in there, especially the spouse and probably the children and maybe the parents, and much more information. You might want to think of a tombstone as the beginning rather than the end. When you start discovering all the records with information about them and their family members. There are monuments, headstones, and markers with the full name, birth date, maybe the full birth date, but usually just the year, and the death date, the same thing. And in the early years on the old tombstones, you might find an epitaph. Now there's different types of cemeteries. There's the city and county cemeteries. These are fairly of recent origin, some of them beginning about 1850, but most of them around about 1900 or a time of state registration. Then there's the national cemeteries. These are recent, but if you happen to have a military ancestor, this would be a good place for you to search. There are private cemeteries. These usually begin in the early 1900s. Some, however, were earlier. Then there were the church cemeteries. These are the most common, both in America and European countries. The records that would be classified as Saxton records would be the burial register, if they exist. Recently, some of them have been indexed by the tombstones that are still in existence. But if there's no stone now, there is no record. Get to know the cemetery laws in the state where you are searching, as they're not the same in every state or every cemetery. Then there's the family cemetery. These are numerous in the East and the South of America. Some of them exist in foreign countries. Most of them are in terrible condition because no one has ever taken care of them. But on the other hand, some of them are quite beautiful. So if you want to go to the cemetery and you want to take pictures of headstones, also find the office and ask them for a copy of the records that they might have. They're usually very helpful. If you can't go to the cemetery, search online. There's always findagrave.com or billiongraves.com, and both of these websites are very good. If you take your own pictures while visiting a cemetery, you can post them on Find a Grave and all the information. Use your cell phone to take the pictures. Do not take paper and pencil and rub the pencil over the paper on the headstone. That is not good for the headstone. That technique damages the headstones. Take with you a spray bottle of water and a pair of grass clippers, because usually the grass needs to be clipped around the headstone. You spray the headstone with some water and it will bring out the lettering long enough that you can get a good picture. I was with a friend in Spokane at one time, just to tell you a little story about cemeteries, and I wanted to go to the gravestone of my great-grandmother. Well, we got to the cemetery, we went into the office, they got us all the information, told us exactly where to go, even gave us a map. We went over to where the headstone was supposed to be, and we looked and looked and looked. We could not find it. My friend took off around the graveyard thinking that they gave us the wrong directions, and she was looking, and I was standing in the road by the car, and I had the map, and I was trying to figure out just exactly by the map where this headstone was supposed to be. Well, finally, I just got so frustrated that I looked up and I said, "Grandma, where are you?" I looked over, and there her headstone was, just in front of me. Well, I hollered to my friend to come over that I had found the stone. So don't give up looking in a cemetery either, even if they give you directions. Another story was about my great grandfather, the husband of my great grandmother. Well, he's buried in Caney, Kansas. And we were at the cemetery trying to find the cemetery office. Could not find any office anywhere. Decided we'd go to the Historical Society. That's where we were going to go anyway. Found out that they were closed for the day, which they shouldn't have been. They should have been open. And as we were sitting there in the car wondering now what are we going to do, a car pulled up and wanted to know if we were looking to get in the Historical Society, and we explained yes and why and what we were looking for. Well, she happened to be the one that was in charge of the Historical Society, so she let us in, gave us all the information we wanted. There was the obituary, there was a story about my great grandfather. She called the cemetery, told them that we would be over there. Would they please take us to the headstone? Which they did. So on these trips, and if you ever do anything like that, people are so helpful with getting you the information that you need. Newspapers, articles, obituaries in the newspapers are a good source of information. Usually gives the full name, date of birth, sometimes the date of death. But if you have the full page of the newspaper, the date at the top of the page, you're copying the article from the internet or from the library. Always copy the front page of the newspaper. And of course, all other articles in the newspaper, such as vital records, the birth announcements, marriage announcements, death notices. In the marriage announcements, you'll find the maiden name. You'll find photographs in the newspaper of your ancestors that you didn't know existed. You'll also see the insight to the community and where your ancestors lived. There are news articles about your ancestors, names of their friends and relations. You might look in the newspaper for their next clue for your research. There are school events, social news such as clubs, visiting relatives, parties, trips. This kind of information was most common in small town newspapers. Theater productions, sporting events, graduation, school band, class reunion in the pictures, classified ads, legal notices, advertising, legal naturalization and ceremonies, parties, ships' arrivals and departures, reprinting of old articles. A lot of times they would take an article and they'd reprint it again on the anniversary. That is what has happened in this article you see on the slide. The 3-year-old drives a car, wall yields. Well, this is a story about my husband when he was 3 years old. He and the family had been out driving. They came home. His father parked the car in front of the garage and got out, and his mother got out, and he was left in the car. Well, he thought he was going to figure out what this stick was that his dad was moving around and what it did. Well, he found out the car moved and right into the wall. Of course, he jumped out of the car, ran into his mom because he knew he was in trouble with his dad. But every 10 years after this event happened, this article appeared in the Casper newspaper. So you can always find articles in newspapers. You need to know about researching newspapers. They are secondary information, which is a record created after the event by a person who is not present at the event. Prepare a newspaper worksheet. It'll help you keep organized when you're doing your research in newspapers because you could so easily get sidetracked on some other article. Create a newspaper bookmark in your browser, so if you happen to find an article, you can put it in the browser and you have easy access to it later. Never be afraid to ask for help. When online or in a library, there is always help. Like I told you before, copy the front page of the newspaper. It'll have the name of the newspaper and the date, at least a copy of the full page where the article appears. In other words, if you can't get the full front page, then be sure and get the full page where that article appears. That way you'll have the newspaper and the date it was published. Don't give up looking for information in the newspaper. If it's not there today, it might be tomorrow. Of course, when finding the information, remember you need to source your findings. Census records are the enumeration of the entire U.S. population. The census have been taken every 10 years since 1790. Census records are closed to the public for 72 years. And the most recent census that you have to use is the 1940. Just another year to go to 2022, and we will have the 1950 census. The National Archives is the official steward of the census records. Now, not only do we have the U.S. Census records, but we do have supplemental census records. They are state census, veteran schedules, mortality schedules, slave schedules, defective, dependent, delinquent schedules, agricultural, Native American, territorial, manufacturing, and social statistics. Look into school records for what you might find, like maybe grades or parents. What were the activities of your ancestor? Were they on a ball team or maybe in the band? Well, my research was for my great-grandmother. I have an elusive great-grandmother. Can't find her after she and my great-grandfather got a divorce. And also can't find their youngest daughter, named Theron Stone. I did find a newspaper article about Theron Stone in a Denver school. So thought I'd call the school in hopes that they still had her records and I could find out who her guardian was, and hopefully it would have been my elusive great-grandmother. The school mentioned in the article was a Denver school. I contacted them and they were very helpful, even going into the archives of their records to find the information. Didn't find what I was looking for, so my great-grandmother is still elusive. I did find Theron's information starting with newspaper articles, leading to her death certificate and other information. You might have to travel to the area where your ancestors lived and visit the school where they attended. If the school is no longer there, visit the library of the area and see if they have the records of the school. I have my grandfather's and my father's grade school report card. My father was not a very good student in grade school, but must have gotten better in high school as he did become a doctor. Now about courthouse records, they can be intimidating for family historians. So before going to the courthouse, learn to navigate the field of battle. In other words, what offices are there and who do you need to contact for the information you'll be looking for? Arm yourself with the knowledge and a plan of attack. Tax records, both personal property and land, have valuable information for us genealogists. Property records, sales and transfers of personal property, estate records, the purchase and sales of property, division of property, and possibly orphan children. Sometimes you'll find vital records. Adoptions, you need to find out the laws of the state first about their adoptions because every state is different. There are citizenship records, naturalization records, divorce records and civil matters, guardianship records, wills and probates. Military records often can provide valuable information on the veteran, as well as all members of the family. The compiled service records consist of an envelope containing card abstracts taken from muster rolls, returns, pay vouchers, and other records. They will provide you with your ancestor's rank, unit, date mustered in, and date mustered out. basic biographical information, also medical information and military information. The pension application and pension payment records are at the National Archives. They also have pension application and records of pension payments for the veterans, their widows, and other heirs. The pension records are at the National Archives building in Washington, D.C. Then the Bounty Land Warrant application files relate to claims based on a wartime service between 1775 and March 3, 1855. If your ancestors served in the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, early Indian Wars, or the Mexican Wars, you can find their records. Then there's the compiled military service records for volunteers. When researching volunteers who served in the military for a particular war, start with the compiled military service records for volunteers. Begin by searching at the National Archives. Also, a good website here about the Civil War is the Civil War Soldiers and Sailors. It is on the handout given out on the websites for you to search. As a general rule, the National Archives does not have naturalization records. They are created at the state and local courts. After 1906, the courts forwarded copies of the naturalization and immigration information to the INS, the Immigration and Naturalization Service. Naturalization from the federal courts are held at NARA's regional facilities. The National Archives in Washington, D.C. hold the naturalization records for the courts in Washington, D.C. Immigration and passenger list will have the following information: name of the ship, date of arrival, port of departure, passengers' names, and more. Now, as far as the naturalization forms, there are two: the Declaration of Intention, and that is the first papers, and the Certificate of Naturalization, and that is the second papers. Now, as far as the passport applications, the information that you'll find there on the application is the name, also a maiden name, birth date, birthplace, father's name and mother's name, citizenship, occupation, and employer. There's a good website that you can go to check for this information, and it is called the Citizens of Immigration Services. The website is on the end of your handout. Other places that you might want to look is Ancestry.com, FamilySearch.org, and Archives. City directories will help you uncover genealogical resources for any American city. Before you start researching these records, define what you are looking for and learn some history. Knowing your family data will help you keep focused on the right people, the eras, and the neighborhoods. What were the dominant industries of the time? Who were the major ethnic, religious, or cultural groups? Migration and settlement patterns hint to an ancestor's previous home. Get into the local government. Find out when and how the town and county came to be and when the borders were changed. When using the city directory, review the table of contents and understand the organization and the format and the abbreviations that are in the book. Genealogists often use city directories to find names, addresses, and occupations, and can be an alternate method of finding and verifying immigration information. Directories usually came out every 1 or 2 years. The format and contents vary from location to location, also the time and the publisher. The type of directories that we'll find are business directories, street directories, government, town officers, schools, societies, churches, and post offices. You can find city directories at Ancestry.com, MyHeritage.com, FamilySearch.org, and in the libraries and historical societies. Church records are a rich resource for the genealogical and historical researcher. In many parts of states, church records predate the civil records. They therefore document civil events giving birth, marriage, and death information that might otherwise be lost. Besides providing names and dates, church records may reveal relationships between people and family status in the community. In addition, entries of personal nature are not uncommon, and these can offer a glimpse into your ancestors' character or habits. The other information that you can find in church records would be the baptism, christening, marriage, and more. Topographic maps will help you imagine the view out of your ancestors' front door. Topical maps show the land evaluation, waterways, and even man-made landmarks. The U.S. government began creating topic maps in the 1880s. Fire insurance maps capture a different kind of landscape, the city streets, alleys, backyards, churches, homes, outbuildings, and more. Then there's the military maps that during the Civil War, opposing armies drew exceptionally detailed maps that include farms, churches, creeks, roads, and paths. They drew these plans so that they could keep track of the troops' movement. Panoramic maps, these are maps provided a close-up view of the city. They're mostly in the 19th century locations. While these maps are not true to scale, they show the city's layout in a unique perspective. You'll find the digitized collection with maps dating from 1847 to 1921 at the Library of Congress. And then we have the demographic maps, also called the dramatic maps. Demographic maps date back to the 1790s and are usually created from the U.S. Census data. They show distribution and changes in population, agricultural, housing, race, and ethnicity, and more. Not only will these maps give you a glimpse of your ancestors' changing world, but they can provide clues to migration, economic, and status, and much more. Repositories. Repositories are a place that you will find your information. There are public libraries, like city, county, and state libraries. Genealogical libraries. The largest of the genealogical libraries are in Salt Lake City. There's another large genealogy library in Fort Wayne, Indiana, which is the Allentown Library, and also in several other large cities around the United States. Courthouses are a repository, and we just talked about those. Then we have the state and federal archives, state libraries, family history centers. These centers are at church houses of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You will find volunteers there that will be happy to help you with your family history. Now let's take a look at some of the forms that we use in our genealogy research. First of all, the personal record, and then family group sheet, research log, to-do list, items in an individual's file, and the pedigree chart. This personal record is a record that you want to use for yourself. Start your genealogy with this record, putting your name, your full name, when you were born, the day, month, and year, where you were born, where you were baptized, when you were baptized, your father's name, your mother's name along with her maiden name, who you married, the date, and where you were married. Also, here, keep track of your schools that you attended, the churches, your residence, every place you've lived all your life, if you can dig back and get all that information. Workplaces, positions you held, and then any other events that were important to you in your life. We have the family group sheet. This is where you list the husband first, all of his information and his parents' names. The wife is next with her information and parents' names. And then the children are listed, the oldest first, and with all of their dates and places and in. We use a research log. This is to help us keep organized so that you can keep track of any source that you have looked at, what date you did it, what the article was you looked at, if it was helpful or not helpful. You even want to put down what isn't helpful because you can go back again and you don't want to reinvent the wheel. Now, this is the to-do list. It's a very important list of our many lists that we do because you need to do it for one person. You see up at the top, there's a line up there that puts a name. So you choose a name of your ancestor and then you list everything that you need to do. Maybe you need to go find a birth certificate, or maybe you need to find out where they went to school. Anything that you want to find out about that person, put it on his or her to-do list, and then when you get ready to research, you have something to go to do your research. Items in an individual file. Now, this isn't a common form that anybody uses. It's one that I made up for myself because of the way that I do my genealogy. I keep both a computer program with all my information in the computer program, and I also keep a hard copy in 3-ring binders. Each binder is a family with the husband and the wife and the children. And if the children get married, then you form their own 3-ring binder. But each person is in there with all of their information. And so you need this items in the individual file, list everything you have for them. You can take a look at the list and you might see something that you need to go find, and so then you'll put that on your to-do list. And then of course we have the pedigree chart. This you are number 1 on the pedigree chart. Your father's number 2 and your mother's number 3. Males are often always the even numbers and the females are always the odd numbers. You'll have the birth date, birthplace, marriage, place of marriage, death date, and place of death. Now, when filling out these forms, I'll give you a few clues on how to complete the form. If you possibly have all the first, middle, and last name, be sure and list it. Include any nicknames. Include any AKAs, also known as. Now, as far as the dates, you use the day, the month, and the year. Always use a 4-digit year because you're working in the 1800s, 1700s, 1900s, so you need the 4-digit year. Use the first 3 letters for the month. Do not use the number. And places, town, county, state, country, go from the smallest to the largest. Do not use abbreviations. Spell the name out. Now, I told you about citing sources. It's the most important thing to remember in doing genealogy because without documentation, all of your work is simply mythology. There is a formula in citing your sources, and let's just take a book, for instance, and we'll look how to cite that book. First of all, let's look at the citation down at the bottom. The author is first. Then, as you notice, the title of the book, and it is in italics, and that's the way you should do it. And publication information is the New York D. Appleton in 1896. Any other publication information you can put in here, and maybe there's a page in the book that you want to cite that's where you found the information. and any other details that you want to put in this citation. In doing your research, the first thing you want to do is to set a goal. Let's plan that goal. It should be simple, concise, and attainable. It should be for one person or one family. Complete name, nicknames, parents, spouse, and siblings. You'll also want to plan the time period you're looking for. Is it a certain date or is it over a span of time? You need a name for the event, but only one event per goal. Location, look for where this event took place. You want some history of the family or person and location and time. Remember, now's the time to put it on your to-do list. Once you have decided on the event that you're going to research, decide on what sources you need to use. Find what sources are available. Make a list of these sources. What sources are available online or offline? Look for any new available sources that might help you pertain and reach your goal. Now you need to locate the source. Is your source in a repository or online? If at a repository, you will need to check what records are available. Is it the repository that is close to you, that it might only take you a one-day trip to find your information? Or will you have to plan a trip over a few days or contact someone in that area that can help research at that repository? Look at all sources you can find online when you start your research to complete your goal. When you have completed this goal and recorded all of your information, set a new goal. When doing any research, it's a good thing to do is to make a research notebook. You will be more organized and do the research and stay more focused. There are different types of notebooks. The pocket file folder, as shown here on the top right. This type of folder is lightweight and can be used for road trips or even when you're flying somewhere. The 3-ring binder, as shown, is good when you're strictly working at home or in your area. Now, the electronic notebook is the easiest and best because you'll always have your family tree history program and other information on your laptop, whether you're working at home or you're traveling. So, setting goals. Choose one person or one family to do the research. Decide what information you want to find during your research. What records will give you the information that you need. So we need to know. In setting up a research notebook, you need to have at least a business card or some other type of identification in the notebook in case you would leave it somewhere where you're searching and then they'll be able to return it to you. A filled out pedigree chart, so the person that you're working on, you will have the ancestors around him that might help you find information about the person that you're researching. A to-do list, we always need our to-do list with us. Filled out family group sheet, so you'll have the information about the family, and also a copy of the items in the individual file that I was telling you about. Research log for keeping track of what you have researched and if it's good or not usable. Then you need extra blank note paper, information known about your ancestor that you need to research. There are lots of electronic notebooks, but right now I'm just going to tell you about one, and that is Evernote. It is free. Also, for more storage and abilities, you might want to have the pay site. You can create a notebook, create notes within that notebook. It will sync to other devices like your desktop computer at home, your smartphone, iPad, tablets. So if you are at a library and you found information, you scan it into Evernote and it will sync with all the rest of your devices and when you get home, you'll have your information at your desktop. It captures documents and photos. It'll help you create a to-do list or any list. One good idea for making a list through Evernote is your grocery list. Make it on Evernote. You always have your computer or your cell phone with you, so you will have Evernote, the cell phone, and you will have your grocery list, and you haven't left it at home on the countertop. And it will capture images. There are computer programs, and I'm just going to give you 3 different computer programs that we have here. The first one is Family Tree Maker. It's a genealogy software for Windows and Mac that allows researchers to keep track of information collecting during the research and to create reports, charts, and books containing that information. It syncs with Ancestry and FamilySearch.org. There's Legacy Family Tree. It's a genealogy software program for Windows that assists family historians in tracking, organizing, printing, and sharing their family history. The standard edition is distributed as freeware and no restrictions, only requiring registration on the company's website to download the software. Users may pay a fee in order to unlock for additional features in the deluxe edition. Then there's Roots Magic. It's a genealogy program that assists family historians in tracking, organizing, printing, and sharing the family history. When you're doing your family history, you really need to do stories about your ancestors. This is a story. This picture here is a story in itself. I got it from one of my genealogy clients, and I did ask her for permission to use the picture, and she did give me the permission. Now, listen very closely because I want to give you the name of the people that are in this picture. In the back row, there is Dinah Folger Daly, Asa Folger, and by the way, he married a Starbuck. Then there's Clara Folger Jessup. In the front row is Alice Folger Turner, Walter Folger, Phoebe Brown Folger, and Elizabeth Folger Dillon. In the buggy, you can see there's a buggy back in the corner back there, is Henry Daly and daughter, Jessie Turner and daughter Stella. They're in the buggy. Standing by the buggy is D.H. Dillon. Now, let's go back to the picture because Jessie is married to Alice Folger. Henry Daly is married to Diane Folger. D.H. Dillon is married to Elizabeth Folger. This photo was taken in 1888 in North Branch, Kansas. The occasion was a family gathering. The picture is of Walter and Phoebe and their children. We can only assume that Walter and Phoebe wanted a picture of only their immediate family. Now, why do you think I have the whole story of this picture and such an old picture taken in 1888? Well, it was all written on the back of the picture. What a find that is. Just a reference of 2 reference books that I want to give to you. First of all, The Guide to Naturalization Records of the United States by Christina K. Schaefer. This book is organized alphabetically by state. Following the states, there is a section for the U.S. territories and possessions. Each territory is listed alphabetically, followed by an address, and in the appendix, there's a glossary that has addresses and phone numbers of the National Archives facilities and sample forms for requesting a record. The second one is the International Vital Records Handbook by Thomas J. Kemp. This handbook provides the application forms issued by every state vital records office. Use the latest edition of the book for the latest application forms. Simply photocopy or scan and print the form that you need. Follow the instructions and send the fee and the completed form with the identity documentation that they specify to the appropriate record office. Vital records can also be ordered in person or online at vital record offices. Throughout our webinars, there will be more reference materials and books. Okay, now here are all the websites. They are also in the handout. Enjoy your research. Many sites to go to. Have fun. You have just learned the fundamentals of genealogy at a glimpse. The sources we use in your research of your family history, the repositories available to use, forms that help you keep track of the information you have found, and how to plan a goal. So much more to learn about these sources. What is a research notebook? Timelines to help you do your research, techniques to use, organizing your information, planning a research trip, writing stories about your ancestor. All these and more you can find on the webinars list on this website. Enjoy. Your instructor's bio.